Okay, let's dive straight in. Today, we're unpacking something, well, something absolutely essential if you want to sound confident, natural when you're speaking English.
hmm
Expressing your opinions clearly.
That's right. It sounds simple, maybe, but think about your daily life. You're chatting with friends about, say, the latest movie you saw, or maybe you're in a work meeting trying to contribute.
Or even just posting online.
Exactly. Or discussing the news. You're constantly needing to say what you think about things. It's everywhere.
It really is fundamental, isn't it? But, looking at the material we've been exploring, this seems to be a point where a lot of English learners, even quite advanced ones, feel a bit stuck.
Yeah, stuck is a good word. They might have the vocabulary, they might understand the grammar perfectly, but then someone turns to them and asks, so what do you think? Or where do you stand on this?
And suddenly, poof,
Yeah,
freeze frame.
right. It's easy to just default to those very simple phrases. Maybe you just keep saying, I think, over and over again.
Or you give those really short answers that don't really go anywhere. Like, did you like the restaurant? Yeah, it was good. End of story.
Precisely. Or maybe in a meeting, what do you think of this new proposal? And the answer is just, it's okay. It doesn't
No.
really add much, does it?
No, it kills the conversation. And you feel that pressure, to say something, but maybe you're not quite sure how to articulate your specific viewpoint clearly, or maybe you feel like you need to have this perfectly formed, incredibly insightful idea before you open your mouth.
hmm And there's also that expectation, particularly in many English-speaking contexts, the sources really highlighted the US and UK here, that you won't just state what you think. People often expect you to offer a little bit of the why as well.
Right. What's your reasoning? Why do you think that? Do you have an example, maybe?
Exactly. Providing that support, that backing, it's absolutely key. It does a few things.
Hmm.
It adds substance, makes your opinion sound more thoughtful, more credible.
And it gives the other person something concrete to actually respond to, doesn't it? Something to discuss.
Spot on.
Yeah.
So our mission today really is to equip you with the language tools and the confidence to do just that. We've really dug into the source material to pull out the most effective ways to, well, first, state your opinion clearly.
Okay.
Then, how to back it up with solid reasons or examples.
That's crucial.
And finally, how to navigate those moments when you need to agree or disagree with someone, but do it politely and naturally.
Yeah, that politeness factor is huge. Okay, let's build this up step by step. First things first. How do you actually start? How do you kick off a sentence in a way that clearly signals, okay, listen up. Here comes my personal view.
Right. This starting point, this opening phrase, it's maybe more important than it seems at first glance. It's like giving your listener a little heads up.
A signpost.
Exactly, a signpost. Using specific introductory phrases, it helps structure your own thought process for a start. It also clarifies that what you're about to say is your perspective, your take on it, not necessarily some universal fact.
Good point. It frames it.
And honestly, just having a bit of variety in how you introduce opinions makes your speech sound much more fluent, more sophisticated than just falling back on, I think, every single time.
Okay, so it's about being intentional with that opening line. The material we looked at gave us a really good, concise set of these essential phrases, not like a massive list to memorize, but the ones you'll genuinely hear and use most often.
That's right. Let's break down a few of the really common and useful ones. First up, probably the most classic, in my opinion.
Can't go wrong with that one usually.
Pretty much. It's direct, it's straightforward, it works in almost any situation, from a casual chat about weekend plans right through to slightly more formal discussions. It just clearly says, this is what I believe. Simple, effective.
Okay, what else?
Then there's, I personally believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Adding that word personally puts a little extra emphasis on the fact that this is your individual feeling or conviction.
So you might use it when your view is maybe different from others.
Yeah, that's a common use case. Or perhaps when the topic is something you feel quite strongly about on a personal level, maybe based on your own experiences, it just adds a touch more weight, a bit more conviction to your statement. Like, look, this is genuinely my belief here.
Got it. Makes sense.
Okay, next. From my point of view,
Hmm.
this one's interesting because it suggests your opinion is shaped by your specific perspective, maybe your unique background, your experience, or the particular angle you're taking on the issue.
Like you're looking at it through a certain lens.
Precisely. So for instance, if you're discussing, say, a new company policy about remote work, you might say, well, from my point of view as someone with young children, the flexibility is fantastic.
Yeah.
You're highlighting that your opinion stems directly from that specific situation.
Okay, that clarifies the origin of the opinion.
Right.
Useful.
Very. Then we have, I would say that. This one often feels a little softer, maybe less assertive than in my opinion.
More cautious, maybe.
Yeah, cautious or perhaps more considered. It can be a slightly more tentative way to offer an opinion, maybe when you're not 100% certain or when you want to be particularly polite or collaborative in a discussion. It's very common in spoken English. And it makes you sound, well, thoughtful, like you're offering a carefully considered statement rather than just a firm declaration.
I like that one. It sounds less confrontational if the topic is sensitive.
It can be, yes. And finally, let's look at, as far as I'm concerned, this phrase kind of sets a boundary on the relevance or the scope of your opinion.
What do you mean by boundary?
It indicates that your view applies specifically to the matter at hand, or maybe it implies that this particular aspect is what matters most to you personally. It can sometimes carry a slight implication that, others might see things differently or prioritize other things. But from your perspective, for your needs or values, this is the key point.
Ah, okay. Like focusing it.
Right. For example, we could debate the design all day, but as far as I'm concerned, the main issue is the cost. We just can't afford that option right now. It zeroes in on what's most important to the speaker in that context.
Those distinctions are actually really helpful. It's not just grabbing any old phrase, is it? It's choosing one that subtly conveys how you're framing your opinion. The material used a great example to bring these to life. What do you think about learning English online?
Yeah, that's a good relatable one. Let's try applying a couple of those phrases we just discussed.
Okay.
So if you use the classic, in my opinion, you might say, in my opinion, online learning is great because it's so flexible and convenient. See, the phrase acts like a clear label, here's my opinion, and then bang, you follow with the core view and the main reason. Very efficient.
Clear, direct, and you've already got the why in there with because. It's not just, it's great.
Exactly. You're immediately giving substance. Now let's try another one, maybe aiming for a bit more nuance. Let's use, I personally believe, you could say. I personally believe that learning English online is effective, but it also requires a huge amount of self-discipline.
Ah, okay, so you're not just saying it's good or bad.
Right. I personally believe introduces your core positive view, its effectiveness, but you immediately follow it with a but, adding a condition, a potential downside, the need for self-discipline. It shows you've considered different facets of it. It's not a simple yes or no kind of opinion.
Yeah, that sounds much more like how people actually talk when they've genuinely thought about something. It shows you're weighing the pros and cons. Using these specific phrases, whichever one you choose, it really does seem to make your opinion sound more structured, more considered.
Definitely. Whether you're in a formal meeting or just debating the best pizza topping with a friend, it tells the listener, okay, I have a clear thought here, and this is my take on it.
And that clarity, as you said, is just invaluable for good communication.
Couldn't agree more.
Right. So, okay, we've kind of nailed down the opening. We know how to start strong. But as we mentioned right at the beginning, just stating what you think. Well, that's often only half the battle, isn't it?
If that, sometimes.
Yeah. The next crucial piece, and this is something that really elevates your spoken English, is explaining why. Why do you hold that opinion?
This is where you move beyond just, delivering a verdict.
Yeah.
It's good, it's bad, to actually providing the evidence, the rationale, the reasoning behind it. In English conversations, especially in those US-UK contexts we mentioned, offering reasons is almost expected. It makes your opinion more persuasive, certainly more credible.
And just more interesting, frankly.
Absolutely. If someone just says, I think we should go with option A, and then stops, you're left hanging, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're thinking, okay.
Why?
Yeah, what's the logic? But if they say, I think we should go with option A because it aligns best with our budget constraints, or because it has a proven track record in similar projects, okay. Now you understand the basis for their view. You have something tangible.
It makes you sound much more informed, more prepared. And it gives the other person something specific they can actually discuss or maybe even challenge if they disagree with the reason.
Precisely. And the sources gave us some excellent, really common phrases for creating that link, for bridging your opinion statement to the justification that follows.
The connective tissue of the argument.
That's a great way to put it. So a very direct one is, the reason I think that is because, very explicit, you're clearly signposting, here comes the cause, the basis for what I just said. Leaves absolutely no room for doubt.
A bit formal maybe for everyday chat.
It can be, yes, slightly more emphatic or structured. A much more common, concise version you hear all the time is simply, that's because. It links the statement that came immediately before it to its reason. I couldn't finish the report. That's because I had too many interruptions. Very natural, very quick.
Okay, yeah, I use that one a lot.
Most people do. Now, another super useful one, especially if your opinion is supported by multiple points, is one reason for this is.
Ah, implying there might be more reasons.
Exactly. It sets up the possibility of adding more support. You can introduce the first point with one reason for this is, and then follow up with another reason is, or also, or furthermore, or in addition, to build your case layer by layer. It helps organize your thoughts when you have several justifications.
Nice. Structured but still conversational.
And then the powerhouse, for example,
Hmm.
or its variations like, for instance.
Absolutely essential. Right. Examples make things real.
They really do. Abstract reasons are fine. It's more efficient. It's better quality. But a concrete example that brings your point to life. It makes it relatable, understandable, memorable. It signals you're about to provide a specific instance that illustrates your general claim.
Okay, let's go back to that example from the sources to see these linking phrases in action. The question was, do you think watching TV is a good way to learn English?
Right. Okay. So instead of just a flat yes or no, let's build a more complete, more reasoned answer. Let's try using because first. Yes, I personally believe watching TV can help your English because you get exposed to natural pronunciation in everyday expressions. Simple, clear. The because directly links the opinion. It helps to the benefit. Hearing natural speech. That's a strong, clear reason.
Makes sense. What about using one reason?
All right. You could structure it like this. One reason I think watching TV is useful is that it really improves your listening comprehension skills.
Okay, that's reason number one.
Exactly. And then you could add, and another key reason is that you pick up a lot of vocabulary, especially idioms and slang, particularly if you watch, say, sitcoms or dramas. See how one reason lets you neatly structure multiple supporting points. You're building a stronger case for your opinion.
Yeah, it feels more organized. And where would, for example, fit into that?
You could slot it in right after stating a reason to make that reason more concrete. Let's build on the vocabulary point.
Oh.
Another key reason is that you pick up a lot of vocabulary. For example, if you watch a police procedural show, you'll learn specific terms related to crime and investigation that you probably wouldn't find in a general English textbook. Or, for instance, watching a show like The Office might expose you to common workplace jargon and conversational fillers.
Ah, I see. You state the general reason vocabulary and then you give specific types of vocabulary or specific shows as concrete examples. That's much more vivid.
Isn't it? It moves from the abstract idea, you learn vocabulary, to something tangible the listener can imagine. Police terms, office jargon. You could even mention a specific phrase you learned. For instance, I learned the expression to touch base from watching a business drama. That personal touch makes it even stronger.
Definitely. It's not just telling someone that TV helps, it's showing them how and where it helps. That really solidifies your point and makes it more convincing. So wow, combining those strong opening phrases with these linking words for reasons and examples, that really makes your opinion expression much more robust, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You sound more articulate, definitely more persuasive, and you're inviting a much deeper, more meaningful conversation. You're showing that your opinion isn't just some random gut feeling, but something you've actually, thought about.
Okay, this is great. So we know how to state our opinion clearly, and we know how to back it up effectively with reasons and examples. But conversations aren't always just us stating our views into a void, are they?
Rarely. Usually there are other people involved with their own ideas floating around.
Exactly. So how do we handle those moments when we maybe don't fully agree with what someone else has said? Or maybe we agree with part of it but want to add a different perspective without sounding rude or, confrontational?
Yes. The delicate dance of agreeing and disagreeing politely. And this is where, as you hinted, culture really plays a significant role.
How so?
Well, in many English-speaking cultures, again, particularly thinking about the US and UK context highlighted in the sources, managing agreement and disagreement smoothly is a really important social skill. It's generally expected that people will have different opinions. That's normal, even healthy for discussion. But the way you express that difference, that really matters.
It's not just about being right. It's about maintaining the relationship, the rapport, the respect in the conversation.
Precisely. It's about navigating the difference constructively. Let's start with the easier side. What if you completely agree with someone? How do you show that clearly and positively?
Okay, yeah. Full agreement. What are some good go-to phrases?
When you genuinely are on the same page as someone, you want to make that clear and maybe even reinforce their idea a bit. So the most straightforward is probably, I completely agree with you.
Simple, direct. No ambiguity there.
None at all. Or a really nice one is, That's a really good point. This does more than just agree. It actually praises the other person's contribution. It shows you not only agree, but you also value what they said. You found it insightful. Great for building a positive interaction.
I like that. It affirms the other person.
Definitely. Then there's, I see what you mean. Now, this phrase primarily signals understanding, okay, I follow your logic. But if you say it right after someone makes a point you agree with, often with positive intonation, it strongly implies agreement. It's maybe a little softer or more reflective than a direct, I agree.
Okay. Shows you've processed it.
Exactly. And for more casual settings, I think so too.
Huh.
Very common, very informal, perfect for chatting with friends or colleagues you know well.
Easy enough.
And you also have stronger affirmations like you're absolutely right or just a sharp exactly. That last one is very concise, basically saying, what you just said perfectly captures my thoughts.
Okay, those are all good tools for showing you're listening, you're engaged, and you're aligned. But let's be real, conversations often have more shades of gray, don't they? What if you mostly agree? Or you agree with one part of what they said, but not everything? Or you want to add your own condition or a slightly different angle? This is where partial agreement comes in, right?
Yes, and mastering partial agreement is incredibly valuable for handling complex discussions gracefully. It allows you to validate the other person's point, which is crucial for politeness, while still introducing your own nuance or viewpoint. It clearly shows you've listened and processed their idea, but you have something further to add or perhaps modify.
So it avoids making them feel dismissed.
Precisely. The sources gave us some excellent structures for this. A classic is, I see your point, but. You explicitly acknowledge you understand their perspective. I see your point. Huge for showing respect and active listening. The but then clearly signals that you're going to introduce a contrasting thought or a slightly different idea. It prepares the listener for your divergence without just trashing their initial statement.
Okay, acknowledge, then pivot.
Exactly. Similar vibe with, that's true, but I also think that. Here, you validate the truth or the validity of their statement, that's true, showing you accept their point is reasonable or factually correct. But again, the but transitions smoothly to your own additional perspective or a counterbalancing thought.
So you're adding to it, not replacing it entirely.
Often, yes. Or consider, I agree to some extent, but. This phrase explicitly states that your agreement isn't total. You agree partially, which is a very polite and clear way to introduce a different view or perhaps a limiting condition. It's definitely softer than launching straight into a disagreement.
The source used that fast food example to illustrate this, right? If someone says fast food is terrible for your health, how would you use partial agreement there?
Right, so instead of just saying, no, it's not, or even just, I disagree, you could use one of these partial agreement structures. For example, I see your point acknowledging the health concern, but I think it's probably fine if you only eat it occasionally, in moderation.
Ah, okay. So you're not denying that it can be terrible for health. You're accepting that premise. I see your point.
Exactly. You validate their concern, but then you introduce the condition of moderation or frequency, which fundamentally shifts the focus. You're essentially saying, yes, eating too much fast food is bad. I agree with that underlying idea, but the amount you eat really matters. It transforms a potentially black and white statement, it's terrible, into a more nuanced discussion about consumption habits.
That makes perfect sense. It feels much less like a head-on collision of opinions, doesn't it? It's more like saying, okay, I understand your concern about the health aspect, and I'd like to add this other factor, moderation, into the picture for consideration. It feels much more collaborative.
Precisely. Collaborative, diplomatic, thoughtful. Partial agreement is a key skill for navigating discussions where things aren't simple, where there are multiple valid points to consider. Now, what about when you really don't agree? When you need to express polite disagreement?
Right. This is often the trickiest one, isn't it? Especially, I think, if your native language or culture handles disagreement very differently, maybe much more indirectly. You want to be clear that you have a different view, but you absolutely want to avoid sounding aggressive or dismissive, or like you're telling the other person they're stupid or just plain wrong.
Exactly that. Saying you are wrong directly is almost always too blunt, too confrontational in standard English conversation, especially in professional or polite social settings. It can shut down the conversation immediately. So the source material highlighted some excellent softer approaches. The key strategy is often to focus on stating your differing perspective, rather than directly attacking or negating theirs.
Okay, so how does that work in practice? What are the phrases?
Well, a very gentle and indirect way is, I'm not sure I agree with that. See how it's framed? It's about your own uncertainty. I'm not sure I agree. Rather than making a definitive statement that their point is incorrect. It subtly leaves open the possibility that maybe you've misunderstood or that there's room for doubt. It softens the disagreement considerably.
That's very polite, almost tentative.
It can be. Another good one is, I see things a little differently. This frames the disagreement purely as a difference in perspective. Imagine two people looking at the same sculpture from opposite sides. They see different things, right? Neither is necessarily wrong. They just have a different view based on their vantage point. This phrase captures that idea. It politely says, my opinion is different from yours, without judgment.
I like that. It depersonalizes the disagreement.
It does. And a slightly more direct, but still generally polite option is, actually, I have a different opinion on that. This clearly states you hold a different opinion. The word actually at the beginning often serves as a gentle discourse marker, sort of preparing the listener that what's coming might be contrary to what was just said or softening the disagreement slightly. It's clear, but the framing around my opinion keeps it polite.
I notice a pattern here. All these phrases seem to shift the focus onto your view, your uncertainty, or your perspective, rather than making a direct negative judgment about the other person's statement.
That is absolutely the core strategy behind polite disagreement in English, particularly in North American and British contexts. It's about respecting the other person's right to hold their view, while clearly and confidently asserting that your own view happens to be different. And crucially, after using one of these opening phrases for disagreement, you'd then typically follow up immediately with your actual opinion, and ideally, the reasons for it, using the structures we talked about earlier.
Right, you don't just leave it hanging at, I disagree.
No, definitely not. That would be unhelpful. So you might say, I see things a little differently. From my point of view, the main challenge isn't the budget. It's actually the tight timeline. The reason I say that is because we still need to complete the testing phase, which usually takes 2 weeks. See? You state the difference in perspective, then immediately provide your alternative view and the reason backing it up.
Okay, state the disagreement politely, then present your alternative view with its own support.
Exactly. It turns a potential conflict into a constructive exchange of different reasoned perspectives.
This is incredibly practical. Getting the hang of these nuances for agreement, partial agreement, and disagreement really feels like it unlocks the ability to participate fully and effectively in pretty much any English conversation without that constant fear of accidentally causing offense.
It really does. It's about finding that balance, expressing yourself honestly and clearly, while also skillfully navigating the social dynamics inherent in communication.
Now, let's maybe broaden our view a little bit and think about the bigger picture, the context for all of this. The source material spent some time discussing how expressing opinions is, well, quite common and even expected in many English-speaking cultures, specifically mentioning the US and the UK.
Yes, and this is a really key cultural insight. It's quite different from some other cultures where expressing a strong personal opinion, especially one that might differ from the group or from someone senior, might be less common or might be done very, very indirectly. But in the US and UK, broadly speaking, having and voicing your opinions is often seen as just a normal, even positive part of conversation across many settings, from casual chats over coffee to more formal meetings or classroom discussions. It can be seen as a sign of engagement, of critical thinking, of actually participating.
So if you're learning English with the goal of, say, working in an international team or studying abroad in one of these countries, understanding this expectation is almost as important as learning the phrases themselves, isn't it? It's not necessarily considered rude to disagree.
Provided you do it politely. That's the key caveat. Using the kinds of softening phrases and reason-giving strategies we've been discussing is crucial. But yes, the act of disagreeing itself, when done respectfully, is generally accepted and often even welcomed as part of a healthy discussion or debate.
So there's a value placed on that open exchange of ideas.
Generally, yes. The idea is that airing and considering different viewpoints leads to better outcomes, better understanding. The approach is often fairly direct. People will say, I disagree or I see it differently. But crucially, it's usually softened by politeness markers and followed by reasons. For instance, in a US or UK business meeting, hearing someone say, I disagree with that approach and here's why, followed by a logical explanation, would likely be seen as a standard, acceptable way to contribute a contrary view.
The here's why part is critical then. It shifts the focus.
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes the disagreement about the ideas, the logic, the evidence, not just a blunt personal rejection of the other person or their statement. It frames it as a contribution to the problem-solving process.
That's a really useful way to think about it. Disagreement isn't just a negative, it's potentially an invitation to discuss the underlying substance, the supporting evidence.
Well put. And this contrasts quite significantly, as the source noted, with cultural contexts where maintaining group harmony, avoiding conflict, or preventing anyone from losing face is the absolute top priority.
How might disagreement look different there?
Well, instead of a direct, "I disagree," people might use much more indirect strategies. The source mentioned one tactic,
Yeah.
saying something like, "That's an interesting idea."
Ah, the classic non-committal acknowledgement.
Exactly. It acknowledges the other person's contribution politely, shows you heard them, but it doesn't actually signal agreement or disagreement. It kind of parks their idea gently to one side, creating space for you to then introduce a different perspective, perhaps framed very softly as just another possibility to consider, rather than a direct correction or contradiction. That's an interesting idea. I was also wondering if perhaps we could look at it from this angle.
That's an interesting idea. It feels very diplomatic, doesn't it? It buys you a moment, avoids any immediate friction. It really highlights how the same underlying need, introducing a different viewpoint, can be tackled with vastly different linguistic and cultural tools.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And these kinds of differences really underscore why simply translating phrases word for word from one language or culture to another doesn't always work effectively. You really need to understand the cultural purpose and the social implications behind the language choices.
And this becomes even more critical in professional settings, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
In a work meeting, the stakes can feel higher. You need to be able to contribute your expertise, voice valid concerns, maybe challenge assumptions. But you also have to maintain positive, productive working relationships with your colleagues, your boss, your clients.
It's a balancing act.
It really is. And the source material strongly emphasized that in professional environments, particularly in collaborative team settings common today, the language used to express opinions, and especially disagreements, tends to become even softer, more indirect, and very much focused on collaboration rather than confrontation.
So, okay, in that context, instead of saying, your plan won't work, or even a polite but direct, I disagree with your plan, what would be a more typical or preferred approach?
Well, the source gave an excellent example. Instead of anything that sounds like a direct confrontation, "You're wrong, that's a bad idea," or even a blunt disagreement, "I disagree," a professional aiming for a collaborative tone might say something like, "Let's maybe look at this from a different angle."
Ah, I like that. Let's is inclusive.
Exactly. Or they might phrase it as a tentative suggestion or question. "Could we perhaps consider an alternative approach?" Or, "I'm just wondering if focusing on X might achieve Y more effectively." Notice how these phrases don't explicitly label the current idea as bad or wrong. Instead, they gently suggest exploring other possibilities or angles.
Let's look at this from a different angle. That feels brilliant, actually. It's inclusive, as you said, let's. It's non-judgmental about the current angle they were looking from. And it frames the introduction of potentially a completely different idea as simply considering another possibility together. It really invites the group to explore with you.
That's exactly the goal. This kind of collaborative language was highlighted as being key for promoting productivity and maintaining respect in the workplace. When people feel their ideas are being heard, perhaps gently built upon, or that alternative angles are being explored collaboratively rather than just being shot down, they're naturally much more likely to contribute freely, feel valued, and work effectively as a team.
Makes total sense. Are there other examples of that softer professional language?
Sure. Instead of saying that won't work because of Z, you might say, "I have a slight concern about how Z might impact the timeline." Framing it as your concern is softer than stating it as definite problem. Or instead of "your solution doesn't address X," you could ask a question, "How would that approach help us address the challenge of X?" Framing it as a question invites discussion rather than stating a flaw.
It's like you're gently steering the conversation or the project in a different direction, rather than slamming on the brakes or criticizing the driver. It's subtle but powerful. So really understanding these cultural layers, the general expectation to have opinions in some contexts, the high value placed on providing reasons, and then these different strategies for handling agreement and disagreement across casual, formal, and professional settings, that seems just as vital as memorizing the phrases themselves.
It absolutely is. It's what allows you to communicate not just correctly in terms of grammar and vocabulary, but effectively and appropriately, given the specific situation and the people you're talking to.
This has been incredibly useful, really breaking down not just the what, but the why and how. Now, after all this discussion, it's really over to you, the listener. The source material had a great suggestion for how you can start putting these skills into practice right away.
Yes, absolutely. Listening and understanding is one thing, but the best way, really the only way to truly master these techniques and make them feel natural, is to actively use them yourself. So the challenge is pretty simple, something you can do on your own, maybe even right now.
Okay, what is it?
Step 1. Pick a simple question that requires you to state an opinion. The source suggested, do you think smartphones are good or bad?
That's a perfect starting point because obviously there are strong arguments you can make on both sides.
Or you could pick something else you genuinely have feelings about.
Definitely. Maybe a recent movie you loved or hated, a local issue in your town, a new piece of technology you've tried, your opinion on pineapple on pizza, anything where you have a view.
Okay, got my topic. Step 2.
Step 2. State your opinion clearly using one of those introductory phrases we talked about at the beginning. Choose the one that feels right for how you want to present your view. In my opinion, I personally believe, from my point of view, I would say that. Or, as far as I'm concerned, just pick one to start.
Right, frame it. And
Okay.
step 3. Step 3. Provide at least one clear reason why you hold that opinion. And ideally, add a specific example to illustrate that reason. Make sure to use those linking phrases we discussed, like because. The reason for this is. One reason is. Or, for example. Put the whole structure together.
Okay, let's quickly walk through that smartphone example just to model it. Suppose my opinion is that smartphones are generally a good thing. How might I structure that?
All right. You could try. From my point of view, opener smartphones are fundamentally good tools for modern life. One major reason for this is reason linker. Their incredible ability to connect people almost instantly, regardless of distance. For example linker, I can have a video call with my family who live on the other side of the world whenever I want, something that just wasn't easily possible even 15 or 20 years ago.
Okay, that works. It's got the opener, from my point of view, the clear reason, connection, and a specific personal example, video calling family. It feels complete.
Exactly. Now let's try the opposite opinion. Maybe you think they're more bad than good.
Okay, let's try it. I would say that softer opener smartphones have actually introduced some significant problems into our daily lives. That's largely because Reason Linker, they are incredibly distracting and can make it really difficult to focus deeply on tasks for extended periods. For instance, Example Linker. I often find myself compulsively checking notifications even when I'm trying to read a report for work, or even just enjoy a quiet moment, and it constantly breaks my concentration.
Perfect. Again, same topic, opposite stance, but both answers use the structure effectively. Clear opener, linked reason, concrete example. Both sound much more developed and convincing than just saying they're good or they're bad.
So the challenge for you is to do exactly that. Pick a topic you care about, something you have an actual opinion on. Then try saying your opinion out loud using an opener, a reason, and an example. Or even write it down first if that helps you structure it.
And maybe try using different opening phrases or think of a second reason. Practice really is the key here to making these phrases feel less like textbook examples and more like natural tools readily available in your communication toolkit when you need them in a real conversation. Don't be afraid to experiment and find what feels comfortable for you.
Definitely. And we'd actually love to hear what topic you chose. Maybe think about what you enjoy discussing in English and try sharing your opinion on it, perhaps in the comments, or just practicing with a language partner using some of the techniques we've explored today.
Great idea. Active use is where the learning really solidifies.
And just to give you a heads up on what's coming next, based on the material we've been reviewing, our next deep dive is going to tackle another incredibly practical and often requested area for English learners, identifying and crucially fixing some of those really common grammar mistakes that can trip people up.
Ah, yes, that'll be a good one. Focusing on those frequent errors can really help polish your communication and boost your accuracy and confidence even further.
Definitely something to look forward to. So, okay, let's try to wrap up this deep dive on expressing opinions. What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think the main message is that expressing your opinion effectively and naturally in English is about much more than just knowing the words I think. It's really a multi-part skill.
Building blocks.
Exactly. First, using specific introductory phrases to clearly signal your viewpoint, in my opinion, from my point of view, etc. Second, backing up that viewpoint with clear reasons and, whenever possible, concrete examples using linking words like because, for example.
And third,
Third, skillfully navigating agreement and disagreement, knowing how to agree fully, partially, or disagree politely, using appropriate language. I see your point, but I'm not sure I agree. While also being aware of the cultural context and adjusting your approach, especially in professional settings.
so it's structure, support, and social awareness, really.
That's a perfect summary. Use the phrases we've explored today. Start paying more attention perhaps to how native speakers around you, or in media you consume, express their opinions. Notice the words they choose, how they structure their points, how they handle disagreement. The more you notice and the more you actively practice structuring your own thoughts this way.
The more natural and confident you'll become.
Exactly. Becomes second nature over time.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Think about conversations you've had recently. When someone expressed an opinion, how did the way they expressed it make you feel? Not just about their idea, but about them as a communicator. Often it's not just what people say, but how they say it, how clearly, how respectfully, how confidently that truly impacts how their message is received and the connection they build.
That's a great point. As you practice expressing your own opinions using these techniques, consider not just the clarity of your message, but also the rapport and the connection you're aiming to build with the person you're speaking to.
Food for thought.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So keep exploring, keep talking, keep practicing, and really try to enjoy the journey of becoming a more articulate and confident English speaker.
Well said. Until the next deep dive.